This video is about the ROBOSPEAR, an incredible new method to defeat Yama found by computer search that does way more damage than any other method in the game and uses new mechanics to accomplish this. It's also our most optimized solution yet and is so easy that anybody can do it. In this video, we're going to start with a quick recap of the meta, and then we're going to talk about the new mechanics, and finally, we are going to push things to the max and break several world records. This is the third and final video in our computer-optimized Yama series, where we've been using recursive search to iterate through all possible solutions and using algorithms to find and keep only the best ones. This was a really fun data science project to work on, and I really hope you enjoy. When Yama was first released, the mage method was the easiest and simplest way to get the kill. But unfortunately, it doesn't do much damage, and on our ranking scale, it comes in at negative 11%. This was beaten with the invention of the Dono Fly, the first melee cycle-based method, and just look how incredible this is. Yama is normally a difficult boss fight, but these simple tiles that you just follow and attack when it tells you solve everything. This showed the community what was possible, and plenty of other methods with their own small advantages were created, such as the Mono Fly or the Greg Fly. These methods are known as the 4-tick cycle-based methods because they all attack every 4 ticks, and they come in at 0% because we're using this as our baseline. But don't be fooled by this 0%. It's still a lot of damage, and frankly, it's not clear how we get more damage than this. We're attacking as much as we can with the best, highest damaging weapon, so how do we beat it? Well, this is where we get into the extremely complicated 3-tick methods. If you don't know what 3-ticking is, please pause and read this diagram, but I think most of you already know that every perfect fireball dodge you get right in the nook speeds you up by 1 tick, meaning some of your 4-tick attacks can be sped up into 3-tick attacks. This is fundamentally how we get more damage at Yama, and you're going to see every method we're going to look at from here on out uses 3-ticking and does so in creative ways, always trying to get as many perfect dodges as possible. And the first method to do this was Port Khazard's No Fly, coming in at 6.2%, and it's very hard. Note how Port Khazard is getting as many of the perfect dodges as possible and trying to attack in the middle of all that to maximize DPS, which is super complicated. In fact, this method is so complicated and difficult to execute that people started to turn away from cycle-based methods as a solution to 3-ticking in general. And what really pulled people away from these cycle-based methods was Mulgoat Kirby's reaction method, which is really good, 8.1% damage and only medium difficulty. It's a completely different school of thought. Rather than teaching you a set cycle that is the same every time, you learn 6 sub-cycles and how to identify when to use them, and this has lots of advantages. It was so cool watching these methods come out because you had these 2 competing schools of thought and then these 2 highly experienced players, Mulgoat Kirby and Port Khazard, each running with one, and we got to see the results. Cycle-based methods are consistent, which is really nice, but they're also rigid. Reaction methods are inconsistent, but they're flexible, and it's precisely this flexibility that allows it to get more damage. So, for quite a while, Kirby's method was the highest damaging method, and it was pretty easy, and so that's what everyone would do. However, I really wanted to create a better method, and specifically a cycle-based method that could beat Kirby's, and so that's when we turned to computer optimization. If you've seen the last 2 videos, you know we made several methods that tried to beat Kirby's method in damage, but only the final one, the RoboKite, succeeded. The RoboKite is harder than Kirby's method for sure, but it gets 14% damage, and it does this by using chase tech, where we drag Yama around into precise positions which unlock new, faster cycles. Definitely check out the last video if you want more information, but that concludes our recap of the meta, and it's a pretty interesting meta, and you might have the problem of not knowing which method is right for you. But that problem might be a thing of the past because we now have incredible new mechanics and the ROBOSPEAR. Trust me, this is insane. The ROBOSPEAR comes in at 31%, and no, that is not a joke. This blows away every other method, and my gosh, when you see just how optimized this is, I don't think you're ever going to want to do another method again. Okay. That all sounds amazing and exciting, but didn't we say in the last video that the RoboKite was as optimized as it gets and had the highest damage possible? How could 31% be even remotely achievable? Let's take a look at the new mechanics. The player Muffyn, who many of you recognize by now and who is a huge contributor to this project, was looking for alternative ways to start RoboKite early. In the first two phases, Yama chases you, but in the third phase, Yama is bound in place. In fact, the game even tells us this, saying Yama is bound by a magical force. RoboKite only works by removing this bind. However, the only consistent way we've found to do it is with the Scorching Bow special attack, which replaces it with its own bind, and that lasts 20 ticks. And this is why RoboKite has that 20-tick intro, which is very optimized, but doesn't get the benefits of chase tech until 20 ticks in, and that's what Muffyn was looking to change. Muffyn started to look at obscure special attacks and eventually came across the Blue Moon Spear, whose special attack is literally called Break Shackles, so it does sound like it's going to unbind Yama in some way. But then Muffyn pointed out something incredible. This special attack does 1% more damage and 1% more accuracy for every tick that the target is bound. Usually, the way you would use this special attack is you would freeze your target, and let's say you freeze them for 30 ticks, well that lets you get one hit off against them that does plus 30% damage and accuracy. This isn't a common strategy to see, and this is a bit of an obscure armor set, but just think about this. 1% more damage and accuracy for every tick the target is bound, and remember Yama is bound by a magical force? What the heck is going to happen when we use this special attack against Yama? Is it going to unbind Yama like we want? Is it going to do a ton of damage? Is it going to one-shot the boss because the boss is infinitely bound so we get infinite damage? What the heck is going to happen? We just hit an 112. That is absolutely insane. It appears that yes, Yama's binding does give us a massive damage bonus. That is so incredible. And on top of that, it unbinds Yama immediately, which is beyond all of our expectations. But okay, let's figure out the whole unbinding thing later, because right now we need to figure out just how far this can go. This is so insane. 112 is literally one of the highest hits you can even do in the game at all. There are a few heavy weapons that can hit into the 80s or the 90s with their special attacks, but beyond that, you pretty much just have the Zerite crossbow, which can hit an 110, or the Darok set, which when you're at 1 HP, you can hit up to 120. But then we tried the Blue Moon Spear once again and hit an 146. What is going on? This is just so beyond anything that you can even see anywhere in the game. But as crazy as this 146 is, it's still not the max hit world record, because according to the wiki, the max possible hit is 195. This is done using the Karis Partisan, which has a weird effect on bug-type enemies, and the wiki also tells us that it's a 1 in 3,315 chance to get this hit. Okay, let's keep trying the Blue Moon Spear and see just how far we can go. We got an 189, an 191, 194, and then an 195, tying the max hit world record. And there it is, an 198, a new max hit world record. Okay, I think we need to take a bit of a breather here because all of this is so insane. Muffyn had set out simply to find a weapon that could unbind Yama earlier than 20 ticks, but ended up finding not only one that unbinds immediately at 0 ticks, but is also the literal new max hit in the entire game. And if you've seen this series or are familiar with how Yama mechanics have evolved, you know that this is like the 5th time there's been a game-changing new mechanic that changes everything, and it feels like the stars have aligned and the universe is revolving around Yama mechanics, and we've only scratched the surface of what this can do. Because as incredible as these new mechanics are, they are only as good as the strategy that incorporates them, and so we now need to turn to computer optimization and create from them the ROBOSPEAR. If we want to be as successful as possible in creating the ROBOSPEAR, we need to look at the RoboKite and ask ourselves the difficult question, is the RoboKite actually good? Well, it's definitely good in terms of damage, but it's still difficult to execute, and there are a couple key problem areas that we're going to want to address. These problem areas are the intro, the orbs, and the swift blade. Let's start with the intro. The intro to RoboKite is really hard, and it's probably the main thing that's holding people back from learning it because it's just so demoralizing if you fail right at the beginning.
We have to get this right, but ROBOSPEAR is going to require the full Blue Moon set, which is a 5-way switch, so is there a way we can make that easy? The solution lies in our inefficient ticks. The inefficient ticks are just the ones we don't use for attacking in our cycle, for example right here, but that doesn't mean we can't use them for anything. If we look back at old methods, we can see that these inefficient ticks have been really useful. For example, Port Khazard uses them to get more damage by upgrading some of his emberlight attacks to scythe attacks. Muffyn uses them to make the schedule easier by skipping several perfect dodges altogether without losing any attacks. But for the ROBOSPEAR, we're going to do something really cool. Check this out. If we get all 3 perfect fireball dodges and turn these embers into fast embers, we can then rearrange the cycle to place our 2 inefficient ticks directly after the spear attack, which means you will have a ton of time to do this 5-way switch. Here's what it looks like in practice. You just do the attack, click to your first tile, and look how much time you have to switch gear, and you can see the fireballs are the visual indicator of when to move. It's honestly perfect. This intro is so much easier than what we had before, so yeah, that's our first problem area solved. And why don't we just go ahead and make a prototype? Let's see what the ROBOSPEAR might look like with prototype number 1, which is pretty much just the RoboKite with a modified intro to facilitate the Blue Moon Spear. Let's take a look at prototype 1 in action. Wow, that was straight up the fastest solo kill I've ever had, and if you didn't catch it, we actually got Yama to 1 HP before the orbs. That is completely insane. You can even see me make the realization that Yama is at 1 HP here because, I'm just not used to that. That doesn't happen with other methods. This is the first time that in a solo, you actually can kill Yama before the orbs. Okay, amazing intro. We're going to use it for ROBOSPEAR, but we still have a ways to go. Let's now turn to our second problem area, the orbs. Now, I know we literally just said that we can skip the orbs, but that doesn't happen every time, and actually, the majority of the time, you still are going to have to deal with these orbs, so we have to make that as easy as possible. In the RoboKite, the orbs are hard because there's 2 tiles you have to attack from. It would be so much better if we could just have 1 tile here, but the issue is the reason we had 2 tiles in the RoboKite is because on this tick, Yama tries to melee you, so that movement is to dodge the melee attack. It is possible to dodge this melee attack with only 1 tile, but the only way is you have to be on the outside of Yama and then run as far from Yama as you possibly can after this attack, and even then it's only a 1 tile range of safety, so it's very close. We are going to be forcing this into the algorithm, but just remember, every time we force a new thing like this, the odds that there is actually a solution we can find go down, and so it's possible that later on we might have to make some compromises. I quickly threw together prototype number 2, incorporating this method, and then 199, new max hit world record. Alright, enough theorizing, enough knowledge gathering, we know what we want and we know how to get it. It's time to break out the computer optimization. You know the process. We use recursive search to find the attack schedule, and then recursive search again to find all possible implementations of that attack schedule, guided by our fail conditions so that our search is far narrower, and that leaves us with a massive database of every single valid solution that implements our attack schedule. And then we apply our ranking conditions to order the database from best to worst, and then we pick the best ones. We are, however, going to be making an entirely new program specifically for the ROBOSPEAR with some pretty significant changes to how this works, so let's get into what those changes are. First, we make the basic changes for all the things we've discussed, and many minor things, such as enforcing our intro that we solved, and also adding fail conditions to make sure that the orbs are solved with just 1 tile and not 2. But by far the most interesting and impactful change we're going to make, the one that's going to allow all of this to be possible, is to how the iterator itself works. You might remember how in the last video we talked about how moving from a list-based approach to a node-based approach was a really great thing that improved our efficiency massively. Each node represents one tick and contains the information of where your player is on that tick, and when you put these all together, it represents the entire path your player takes for the cycle, and this is what we run our fail conditions against and what we try and optimize. This probably seems like the most intuitive way, right? If we're solving the 70-tick cycle portion, there's 70 ticks, so 70 nodes and 70 positions. That seems like it should be what we do, but there's actually a way to make things far more efficient. Our old cycles were much more complicated and required multiple clicks between each attack, which is why we needed to iterate every single tick. But now with Chase Tech, we can access this really nice rhythm where we just click one tile away from Yama, and then when we reach that tile, we click the boss, and we do this over and over. It's just like Monofly, it's a really simple system to follow. And this means we can now make our nodes represent one full attack instead of every single individual tick. And that means we only need 19 nodes, and each node just contains the information of what tile are you going to click on between those attacks. This is now a much simpler problem. Before, we had a branching factor of 25 and a depth of 70. Now we have a branching factor, a much larger branching factor, maybe about 150, but the depth is only 19. And it actually gets even better because you might remember from the last video, we used a resolution search to find the optimal fireball solve, and we're keeping that. So each fireball is its own node, so we can bring the number of nodes down to only 10. We can also remove several of our more complicated fail conditions, the ones governing the fireballs and the ones governing efficient pathing, because now both of those things are built into the iterator automatically, so we don't have to worry about them. But it gets even better. Take a look at our prototype, and let's ignore the tiles for a second and focus just on the shape of this solution, specifically the 20-tick intro into the 70-tick repeating cycle. We can actually start to make the end of the cycle similar to the end of the intro and fold the intro into the cycle, making the intro shorter, which means less tiles and is overall easier and less to memorize. And with the ROBOSPEAR, we can fold in the intro completely. Yes, that is right. There is no intro in ROBOSPEAR. We have successfully reduced the Yama boss fight down to its most basic form, a 70-tick repeating cycle represented by only 10 nodes of information. Okay, with all of this in mind, we are now so close, we can practically taste ROBOSPEAR. Let's run the program and see what results we get. Something really strange is going on. Rather than getting the wide variety and countless solutions we've come to expect, our search is so restricted that we're really only getting one solution with many minor variations. We'll call this group of solutions the perfected set because they're the only ones that give us everything we've been trying to achieve. Each and every solution in the perfected set do the following: solves all the mechanics, does the most damage at 31%, is infinitely repeatable, has no intro, has the lowest number of clicks per movement at a ratio of 1.0, which is something we've been trying to achieve for quite a while, has only one tile for the orbs, has 3 fireball solves, and each of them use the optimal fireball shape we solved in the last video, and they all have clear and spread out tile markers that are not adjacent to each other. Let's use one of these solutions as prototype number 3, and let's take a look at prototype number 3 in action. Wow, the perfected set really does live up to the name. While this still isn't quite ROBOSPEAR, I can tell you this is such a massive improvement. I've done so many runs of all the methods in all these videos, and this one is just the smoothest, the easiest, the most damage. It often is killing before the orbs. It's really great. But it's still not ROBOSPEAR, and how are we even going to differentiate between all of these solutions? They are so similar to each other, and in fact, let me show you just how similar to each other they really are. Do you remember how we found this fireball solve in the last video, and we used a heat map of the calm areas of the waves to place these fireballs in? Well, it turns out these are extremely restrictive, and that's why we're getting the cycles that we see, which are all very similar looking. See, I wanted to investigate this. Why do they all look so similar? Because I thought maybe I'm leaving something out. However, when I took a look at these fireball solves and where they have to be, it became pretty apparent that this really is all that is possible. The first fireball solve can be on one of these tiles, but you probably want it on this one to better lead you into the second fireball solve, which quite literally only has 5 tiles it could possibly be on. That's all the options you have, else it won't be able to infinitely repeat. It'll fail the later waves. And the third fireball solve, okay, you actually do have a lot more freedom for this, but the tile right after it has to be exactly 6 tiles away from your starting tile to get the orb solve. So what you're left with is this highly restrictive solution space, which pretty much always looks the same. So how are we going to pick one of these to be better than the other to be our official final ROBOSPEAR? Well, we still haven't gotten to our final key consideration, the humble Swiftblade. The Swiftblade is there because in our 70 tick repeating cycle, we have these 3 inefficient ticks that would otherwise go to waste, so we plug them with a Swiftblade for maximum damage. However, it's not that much damage, as one Swiftblade attack does less than half that of an Ember, so you might want to skip this, and also the Swiftblade is pretty expensive and rare, so a lot of players just don't have access to it. In the last video, I did say you could just skip the Swiftblade, but that's kind of annoying to do, and you shouldn't be punished with extra clicks or waiting or movement just because you don't have this item, so it seems like maybe I'll just provide 2 solutions. One set of tiles for using the Swiftblade and one set of tiles for skipping the Swiftblade. They'd be slightly different, and that was the original plan until something incredible happened. Because if we go back to our prototype number 3 and shift these 2 tiles over, we get an incredible solution that somehow works with both variants, both the Swiftblade variant and the non-Swiftblade variant work with these same set of tiles. To use the method without a Swiftblade, just ignore the 7 tile, pretend it's not there, and then you get a Swiftblade free cycle with the exact same amount of clicks, no extra effort required, and it looks really cool if we overlay these and you can see it split and then resolve despite the different timing. It's so amazing how this worked out. On top of everything else, the new mechanics, the perfect set, the fact that I only have to include 1 set of tiles in the description, the fact that it's one solution for everybody, this truly is the ROBOSPEAR. It's the solution we've been looking for. This is it. So let's finally take a look at the ROBOSPEAR in action, and heck, let's just do it with an Abyssal Whip instead of the Emberlight so that it goes a lot slower, will do a lot less damage, but that way you actually get to see the full cycle this time. And that right there is the ROBOSPEAR. 31% damage, and not that hard to do. I encourage everybody, give this a shot. It's honestly, in my opinion, the best way to kill Yama now, and it's certainly the method I'm going to be using from here on out. And to really drive home the point, I'm going to leave you with one last clip. This is my fastest kill ever, and I do believe this to be, I don't have a way to verify it, but I do believe this to be the world record for solo. Okay, the ROBOSPEAR has been a huge success, but we're actually not done yet because we still need to make the ROBOSPEAR Max, a duo method, and then use it to break the world record, the real world record this time, the one that matters, the world record Yama time. In the last video, I said that the RoboKite could be adapted to a duo method to break the current world record, which is a 204.2 by S2L. I assumed that adapting chase tech to a duo method would be easy, but I was wrong. It's really hard. So are we going to be able to bring the benefits of ROBOSPEAR to a duo method? Let's get started figuring out how we're going to create the ROBOSPEAR Max. Okay, first of all, I know what you're thinking. I know the question on all of your minds. Can you use the Blue Moon Spear with 2 players and get double the damage? Unfortunately, no. Even if you both do it on the same tick, only one player unbinds Yama and gets that massive damage boost, so for our method, only one player is going to bring the Blue Moon set and the other is going to leave it behind. We want the ROBOSPEAR Max to feel like ROBOSPEAR and have all of its ease and benefits, but how the heck are we going to do this? There are a lot of challenges we need to overcome. Let's upgrade our visualizer to work with 2 players so we can tackle these challenges one by one and hopefully solve them all. This will be the first time that chase tech has been viable in a duo method, and a lot of people really like doing Yama as a duo, so why don't we just take a step back here and really think about what are our goals? I think we can all agree the overall goal is to make a version of ROBOSPEAR that feels like ROBOSPEAR, that has the benefits of ROBOSPEAR, but just with 2 players. If we get more specific, I would say it should have max DPS, it should be easy with that 1.0 click ratio for both players, it should solve all the mechanics, it should be infinitely repeating, and most importantly, we want one solution for both general use and world record use. Okay, so with those goals in mind, we're ready to get started, and we immediately run into so many difficult problems. This is not going to be easy. The first problem is, who is Yama even going to be targeting? When you spawn in together, Yama chooses a player at random, and if our whole method revolves around controlling Yama's movement, how are we going to do it if we don't even know who Yama is going to be chasing? My initial thought was that we were going to need some crazy solution that is robust to both possibilities, where both players drag Yama around in the exact same way no matter who he targets. But thankfully, there's an easier way. Right before phasing, if you stand on this stone, then you will be delayed slightly and the other player will always be targeted first. So we can make a method where we know 100% that Yama is going to target this player, and we're going to say that's player 1, the one with the Blue Moon Spear. But then we run into problem number 2, which has to do with the fireball solves. The big problem here is that the players can actually block Yama. So Yama can be targeting player 1, but if player 2 is in the way, then Yama cannot progress, and that messes everything up. There's also the issue that player 2's fireballs are mirrored from player 1's, and so we're going to need a completely different fireball solve, and then there's even more issues, and they started to pile up, and it became pretty clear we were going to need to make some serious compromises if we wanted this to work. After a lot of testing, here it is, the ROBOSPEAR Max, a really good solution that does give us what we want, but there are a lot of compromises, so let me tell you a bit about those. The biggest compromise we had to make is we didn't solve both players together as one solution with the computer optimization. Instead, we used ROBOSPEAR to solve player 1, and then recorded Yama's movements, and then used a modified version of RoboFly v2 to solve player 2 around that. It's definitely a bit disappointing to solve the solution in pieces like this rather than getting the true optimal solution which you solve all at once, but how does this solution we have, the ROBOSPEAR Max, stack up with the goals we laid out initially? Well, here are those goals, and for the first one, player 1 does get max DPS, but player 2 does not. But this is actually okay, because we were able to get player 2 to have max DPS for the first 10 attacks, which is more than enough. So we do get max DPS, but if you get a slow kill, then player 2 will lose some ticks, and it'll only be close to max DPS, but I think this is actually a really good compromise, and I'm actually really happy with this. For goal number 2, we do get our 1.0 click ratio for both players. For goal number 3, it does solve all mechanics. For goal number 4, it is not infinitely repeating, but you know what, this doesn't matter. In duo, you kill so quickly, especially with a Blue Moon Spear, that it doesn't need to be. And for goal number 5, it does work, both as a general method, because it's easy to do, and for a world record run, because if you're going for the world record, you need to kill Yama in like 5 or 6 hits here, or you're not getting that record, so the fact that it's max DPS up until the 10th hit is good enough. Let's take a look at the ROBOSPEAR Max in action. This method is great. It's so much fun, it does so much damage, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy using this. But why isn't it fully computer optimized? Surely if we did it properly as one solution, we would get something better, or at least see if something better is possible, so why aren't we able to do this? I do believe there exists a solution that would give us everything we could want if you fully optimize this as one solution, and we would call this the ROBOSPEAR Pro Max. To properly solve the ROBOSPEAR Pro Max would be a truly insane undertaking. I don't even know where I would begin, and I just don't think it's worth it. The problem is the search space would be so much larger. First of all, you have 2 players you're solving at once, which makes the search space exponentially larger already, but the worst part of this is we don't know what their attack schedule would be. One of the biggest helps here has been that we've been able to solve the attack schedules beforehand, and that helps us narrow the search. It's actually like the main thing that makes all of this possible. But for a duo method, you can't do it. It's too restrictive, too based on the movement, so you actually would have to solve it together. So you're solving not just one player, but 2 players and their attack schedules at the same time, a crazy large search space. And for a search space as big as this, we can no longer do the simple exhaustive searches we've been doing before, where we just try every combination in a really simple and kind of dumb manner. Instead, we'd have to turn to heuristics. In this context, heuristics means making the iterator smart, able to think for itself, so instead of just blindly trying every possible path, when it gets to a junction, it decides what to prioritize. This is really hard to do, and the worst part of heuristics is you can just be wrong. Like, you could spend months making the smartest program ever, an iterator that will decide perfectly how to optimize its resources, but you could just make a mistake and completely miss the exact solution and waste your time completely. So for now, the ROBOSPEAR Pro Max remains unsolved, but we still have the ROBOSPEAR Max, which is good enough, and I think a lot of people will enjoy it. But if anyone wants to take a crack at solving this properly, I would really love to see that. But right now, we're concerned about breaking the world record, so let's use the ROBOSPEAR Max to do exactly that. The Yama boss fight consists of Phase 1, then the Judge Phase, then Phase 2, then the second Judge Phase, and then Phase 3, which is the hardest phase, but that's the one where we use the ROBOSPEAR Max. For Phase 1 and 2, our strategy is pretty straightforward. We attack Yama with the best weapon that we have with all the buffs, and the only real difference is that we use the Vengeance spell to reflect the damage of the special attacks rather than blocking the special attacks. That's kind of the overview. Of course, there's a lot more nuance, and definitely check out Muffyn's video with her perspective, where she actually does a really awesome breakdown of all the phases, especially Phase 1 and 2 and the Judge Phase, so if you want more information, check out her video linked in the description. I do, however, want to point out just how amazing this Judge Solve that Muffyn came up with is. It's actually a full tick faster than this crazy multi-way switch that speedrunners were using prior to this, and it only requires a one-way switch. It's faster and easier, really incredible. We got started sending attempts. I had never done speedruns for Yama before, so my record was about a 2 minute 30 second, which is actually pretty fast if you're sending Yama normally. But on our first successful run with this method, one where we made plenty of mistakes, we got a 2:23:40, showing just how powerful this strategy is. A 2 minute 12, a 2:09, and then a 2:05.4, so close to the world record. That's only 1.8 seconds off. It was getting really hard. We were sending so many attempts, and then a 200 new max hit world record, and you can see from Muffyn's perspective, it's an orange hit splat, indicating that this is truly the max hit of the Blue Moon Spear. So the official stats of this attack are it can hit up to a 200, and we've quite literally never seen it miss, not even once, so that means the expected damage is 100. We kept sending attempts, but without much luck. We started to wonder if making a change to our strategy would yield better results, and we came up with two potential options. Option 1 would be to start the fight with a Zerite crossbow and to keep resetting until we get that bolt proc that does 110 damage right off the start. This definitely would lead to faster runs, but it would mean we'd have to reset so many times right at the beginning, and so we'd only do it if it was really, really worth it. Option 2 is to use the scythe. The emberlight does more damage per second than the scythe, but on phase 1 and 2, we actually have a few inefficient ticks, so we could swap out the emberlight for just a couple scythe hits for a tiny bit more damage. We need more information, and really the only way to get it is to create a full simulation of the world record run so we can get some much needed statistical data and we can test out in an easier environment which strategies are the best. Let's start our simulation with a simple timeline from 0 to 300 ticks, and then another line representing the same thing, also a timeline, but just in terms of minutes. And let's then start by placing blocks on this timeline representing all the actions player 1 takes throughout the fight. We now write a function for each of these attacks that does a realistic accuracy and damage roll, just like it happens in-game, and this gives us a simulation of how much damage we could expect to do in a given run with these attacks. Now that we have the basic structure, let's add player 2, thrall damage, venge damage, and also the logic for how long each phase is going to take based on how much damage Yama has sustained up until that point. We'll also include a line graph showing how Yama's health starts at 2,500 and then decreases over the course of the fight based on all these damage numbers that we're rolling. To keep track of all our simulations, we're going to need the number of runs, average time, best time, and current time, and let's now get this started at the lowest power. We'll track the distribution of our results with histograms for the overall run, each individual phase, and also super fast runs that make sub 2 minutes. Let's add a cumulative distribution and crank up the power so we can watch as the law of large numbers takes effect and averages everything out, giving us a better idea of what's really going on here. The cumulative distribution effectively represents the probability of getting any given time or faster, so this allows us to target specific times with really good information. It's a little hard to read the exact values, so let's put a little table on the side, and it's just a readout of the cumulative distribution for some really important ticks that we're trying to focus on, so we can see the probability of hitting super fast runs with different strategies. And speaking of these strategies, the last step is to add a selector panel where we can turn on and off various strategies and see how they affect our probabilities. So what are the results when we run this with the different strategies? The Zerite crossbow strategies do increase our chances of getting a world record run, but it's just not worth how many times we'd have to reset to implement these. So we won't be using the ZCB strategy, but what about the scythe strategy? Surely that's a good idea, right? I mean, all we're doing is swapping out a couple emberlight hits for a couple scythe hits. We know they do more damage, more expected damage, so surely that'll give us a greater chance of getting the record, right? Well, actually, no. In fact, they tank our chances of getting the record, and the reason for this is while the scythe does more expected damage, it has lower variance because it does 3 hits. The emberlights have a higher variance, and we're going for those rare world record runs. This just goes to show how important simulating is, because had we not done this, we would have used the scythe, and it would have taken us about twice as long in terms of expected runs in order to get the world record. With this new knowledge and new determination, we decided to send more runs to get the world record. A 2:04.8, 1 tick away from the world record, and this one's so painful because you can see Yama was at 68 health. We easily could have killed Yama in that last attack, but we didn't. We came up a little bit short, so 2:04.8, so close. Oh my god, that is the most painful thing ever. We just tied the world record at 204.2, but I messed up at the end there. I could have attacked with my claws 2 ticks earlier, and I just choked right at the very end. That is so painful. This was a lot harder than I expected. S2L in his world record run made this look so easy, but we had spent hours and hours going for this, but we didn't give up, and eventually we got this run. And there it is, a 203.0, the world record Yama time. And yes, if we talk to Yama and see the global leaderboard, we can see it's there at 203.0 to this day. Wow, that is absolutely incredible. Huge thanks to Muffyn. I have no doubt that the record's going to get broken right after posting this video, but that's okay. Having the record, even for a brief moment of time, is so awesome. And I think that the record can go down to about a 154. At least that's what our simulations show. That's like a 1 in 1,000 chance though, but there are ways you could do a little more damage. They're just really, really difficult. They would involve, doing a mage switch right at the start of P3 so you don't waste time running in. There's a lot of tiny little things you could do, flicking the Ring of Suffering, but you know what? I'm really happy with this run. This has been such a fun project to work on. I never imagined we could get to 31%, and the fact that it's so optimized, the fact that there's now a solo method that anyone can do. I mean, as long as you have the Blue Moon set, it's not that hard to get. Trust me, it's worth it. And we were able to provide a duo method, which is something we didn't have for the RoboKite. So now you and your friend can do this, and it's just so much fun. This really is, just forget about the damage, forget about the ease. It's a lot of fun to do this. The most fun I've had in the game for a really long time. I really hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and definitely check out Muffyn's video of her perspective and the breakdown of the world record run. Or if you're interested in the new Doom boss, also check out Muffyn's strategy for that video, which is so good. That's what I used to get all the combat achievements. It was super hard. Definitely check out those videos from Muffyn. And that brings us to the end. Once again, we're going to be doing an epilogue where we answer these questions. So let's get into that now. If you liked this video, I think you're really going to like my next video. It's something I'm really excited to make, and it's actually not OSRS related, so I'll be posting it on another channel called Thrallin, an old channel of mine that has no videos, but if you go subscribe there in advance, you'll see this new video when it comes out, and you will not regret it because it is really, really interesting. So definitely go subscribe to Thrallin, link in the description, but after that, I do plan to come back and make another OSRS computer optimized video, and it's a crazy idea. It's a long shot. It probably won't work, but if it does, it'll be absolutely amazing, and it'll be really cool for one of the hardest pieces of content in the game. The code for ROBOSPEAR is available for download, so you can find your own solutions and explore the perfected set yourself. And also, these 4 visualizers are also available as websites. No download needed, just click the link in the description and it should open up a website, and it should work on mobile as well. We have the world record time simulator, the wave simulator, but also the 2 most interesting ones are the one for solo and duo, the visualizers, where you can actually plot a path. And I definitely encourage you to do this for duo because, again, the ROBOSPEAR Max is not fully optimized, so you can definitely find a better solution. So has anyone else also found the Blue Moon Spear on Yama and also hit this 200? You would think, right? There's hundreds of thousands of people, you would think one person would have tried it, but it appears not. I mean, the special tech really is just that obscure. I searched a bunch of keywords on various forums where people discuss OSRS, and I found on the official OSRS Discord, there was a conversation where people were talking about RoboKite and Chase Tech, and a guy called Sefezli says, "It'll be cool if it somehow found out how to debind Yama without the Scobo spec. I wouldn't be surprised if Blue Moon spec does it, but that's a meme." So yeah, this guy totally figured it out. Great intuition, but as far as I'm aware, he didn't actually test it out, and his comment went unnoticed. Since I made the last video, there have been several new reaction methods, including Kirby, who updated his own reaction method, and now we also have the Godfly and the Simplefly. So how do these all compare? Well, calculating the damage for these accurately is really annoying because they're not the same every time, so you have to account for everything that can happen and then take a weighted average, and that's really annoying to do, and I'm not going to do that. My guess is these are all still in the 8 to 9% range, which is kind of what you expect with reaction methods, which are limited to the weighted average between a really good run, which can get up to 14%, or a really bad run, which can go down to 2%. This is something I talked about in the last video, where there's this thing called the Ultra God cycle, and reaction methods only get it some of the time, while methods that debind Yama can get it all of the time, so that's why they're kind of stuck in the 8 to 9%, but I'd love to see someone simulate this accurately with time to kill so we can get the final number. The speedrun can definitely get faster. Even with the method Muffyn and I use, our simulations show that a 154 is possible, and that's about a 1 in 1,000 chance. But here are 2 ways that I know of that you could actually make it even faster than it currently is. You can save a tick on each judge phase by having one of the players use a scythe instead of Elder Maul for that overkill damage, which makes you spawn in 1 tick faster. And you can also adapt the ROBOSPEAR Max to do even more damage. The ROBOSPEAR Max does do max DPS for those 10 hits I mentioned, but if you're meleeing Yama, those first 3 ticks when you're running up to the boss, those are wasted ticks, so if you can do a full mage switch in there, then you will get more damage. That's really, really hard to do though, so not something I'm ever willing to do, but I'm really excited to see what interesting things some speedrunners come up with, and I'm really interested to see just how low the record can get pushed. I really do believe that ROBOSPEAR, the solo method, is as good as it gets. The whole 10-node solution, the 70-tick repeating cycle, no intro, the whole perfected set, it's really crazy how all of that worked out. I don't think a better solution exists outside of the perfected set. Within the perfected set, I do think you could optimize for smaller, more subjective criteria like smaller mouse movements or more recoverability, or maybe something to do with having easier timing for switching prayer. But that's out of scope for this project. In terms of what we're focused on, I do think this is as good as it gets, but I would love to be proven wrong. In fact, in both previous videos with the RoboFly and the RoboKite, I also said I thought those methods were as good as it gets within their respective domains, and I was wrong. I was proven wrong twice, both by Muffyn, and I'm really glad I was because it led to these videos. And that concludes our epilogue. Thanks again for watching, and definitely go subscribe to Thrallin for that next video when it comes out in a month or 2.